So it's been quite some time since I've done a battle report, but I thought I would go ahead and produce one for this big fight that we had yesterday. So it was my birthday this weekend, and my wife and baby are off in Mississippi getting ready to help build a cabin, but I'm still stuck in San Antonio for the next 2 days of classes that I got to teach and take at Texas State. So lone gunning it all weekend. A good friend of mine came over and we played a big game of Kings of War. So we did two 4,000 point lists. I took an all dwarf list, and then he just split his and made two armies, 2,000 points of ogres and 2,000 points of vampires. Anyway, so this is my list here. You got Herneas the Hunter, represented by old school Joe Bugman. I took a king on a large beast with the medallion of life. I took a stone priest with the Fireheart medallion. I took a Berserker Lord with the Beast Slayer on a Brock. The Army Standard Bearer, I gave him the Healing Medallion, and then I took another king and gave him Wings of Honey Maze. There's that guy over there on the right. I took my first horde of rifles with Keen Eye. I thought I'd try that out since it was such a big game. You'll see those guys there up front. I just used my old Iron Drakes and kind of pieced them together. In the back there, you'll see two organ cannons and then two flame cannons. And then you'll see a row of 3 different units of Iron Guard with shield. We've got some shield breakers. I think I gave them fire oil just because why not? I think I had like 5 points left that I had to spend. Then I had a horde of earth elementals. They had the diadem of dragonkind, a couple greater earth elementals you can see in the far back. You might get a better picture of that as we go. A whole bunch of Brocks. I had a troop and 2 regiments of Brocks. One of the regiments had strength. The other one had Pathfinder. There's a shot over on the right. And I had a steel behemoth. That's the big dragon back there. And a couple of drillers, which I'm using those Titan Forge guys right now. It's not the right base size, but we don't care. It was a home game, so nobody cared. I'm seriously considering putting them on the cavalry bases, though, because they worked out really well in the game. This is an overhead shot. There's those 3 units of Iron Guard. I also took a unit of Rangers, and I made them Hernias' Rangers. I gave them the upgrade, and they're fantastic. There's the War Machines, and the Brocks, and the Monsters, and there's Hernias' Rangers. Those guys are amazing, and I think I'm going to add them to my regular list. They're really good. All right, so here's my buddy's list. He's got his I don't know, zombie king on the undead worm thing. He's got 2 units of the Soul Reaver cavalry, so the really elite cavalry. He had a group of hunters. I think they had an item, but I don't remember what it was. He had a group of boomers behind him. He had a giant, and he had Grakagamak. He had a unit of siege breakers, which he used the great weapon Iron Guts for, and then he had a unit of regular ogres behind them. He had his mammoth with the bolt thrower on top, and then I'm sorry, Grakagamak is behind that guy actually. I think he's got his warlord with or war chief with the diadem, represented by that old fire belly model. He had a couple of goblin blasters. He was using his iron blasters for, which I thought was pretty fun. And he had a couple of troops of the wraiths, and then he had a horde of werewolves, represented by those Vargheists in the back. That's his deployment. My deployment was pretty heavy cavalry on the left. I shoved the Brocks with Pathfinder behind my lines near the forest, just so they could be flexible if they needed to be. And then I augmented the Brocks with strength on the far left-hand side with my king, and then with the troop of Brocks. I wasn't real sure how this cavalry fight was going to go because he had his dragon there and his other dragon's hiding out behind the tower. Sorry, I missed that before. He's got another dragon. He's an undead sorcerer guy on top of a dragon, the big 1821 with all the attacks. But I vanguarded Herneas and the Rangers up a little bit to give me some open shots and just to have a little bit of a threat out there. Got my Brock Lord over here, so I'm pretty heavy on the left-hand side and pretty light on the right-hand side. In the center, it's all defense 6 and flame cannons. My goal in the center was to hold the line and burn things down with shooting, and hopefully give him more targets so he wouldn't come back and get my shooting. So I got my elementals, my greater elementals, 3 units of Iron Guard in front there, a couple of flame cannons, not to mention the breath weapon off of the steel behemoth and the breath weapon off of the elementals if I need it. And then I have my guns on the right-hand side. I've got the rifles up on the hill. I've got my 2 organ guns there covering a decent swath. And then I've got the horde of shield breakers on the far right. I wasn't sure that was a great plan, but I figured with the help of the 2 drilling machines, I might have been okay. I was real worried about a multi-charge from those werewolves and the ethereals, especially if they got behind my lines, but this is what I did. And that's a broad shot of the overall table. Lots of models. I think one of the things I love about Kings of War is we can play a 4,000 point game. And this game only took us about, I don't know, 3.5 hours to play, and I think with old school Warhammer it would have taken all day. So, all right. So on his turn, he rolls to go first and he wins. He starts advancing things up. He moves his Vargheists up to threaten everything, basically, on that side. I was a little bit worried. I was like, man, I put an individual out there, and if I don't do something smart with him, he might overrun into the organ gun. I might have done something really stupid. And then on this side, he starts bringing some other things up. He makes a pretty key mistake for the game, actually, here. He brings that Goblin Blaster up a little bit, but he's got a lot of things within 6 inches of it. And then here's his center moving up in and around that forest. I'm learning more and more as I play more Kings of War that apparently in Mantica all battles happen in and around forests, which seems to be tactically foolish from sort of a warfare's point of view, but it's just so useful to utilize them either for line of sight blocking or for disrupting people's charges, etc., etc. So forests are like the best place in Mantica to fight, apparently. So he's coming up on the forest. And his dragons come out and his cavalry comes out. Just sort of threatening things. He's got me range-wise and strength-wise over here, so I really have to be careful about what I do. On my turn, I go ahead and move, but one of the first things that happen after I do some movement, I think I got some pictures. This one's kind of blurry. Let's see if I'll move on. All right. So yeah, I moved and then I did some shooting. So I shot those guys pretty good between the rifles, which were in arc but had cover, and the organ cannon. I did a decent amount of wounds to the Vargheists. I also blew up his Goblin Blaster, which did a bunch of wounds to the things around it. Terrible picture. I apologize. I did some wounds to his Soul Reaver Cav, but nothing there. And then this is what I did in terms of movement. On the left-hand side, I shoved my Berserker Brock troop up, just sort of in the face of that cavalry in it. Hoping to draw that charge out, and then I used them to protect the front of the big unit of Brocks with strength from the double dragon charge because they couldn't get into my front arc. I also did some shooting, you'll see, but didn't do really all that good. I think this might have been one of his key mistakes in the game. I understand his reasoning for it, but he sent the Vargheists into the shield breakers. I think he was thinking the shield breakers were a little bit less rugged than they were. And he did some decent wounds to it, but it wasn't enough. He kind of botched his combat that turn and wound up only doing like 5 or 6 wounds to him. So they were going to be able to come back and swing pretty hard back into those Vargheists. And, well, they hit pretty hard. And then he started advancing some other stuff. He brought his Pharaoh, Cursed Pharaoh. Oh, he had a Flying Pharaoh. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. He sent that guy into my, not unexpected, sent him into the rifles, disrupting them for a turn. And then we pulled lots of triggers. He pulled lots of triggers. So he sent cavalry into the Iron Guard on the left. He sent his dragon into my Steel Behemoth. He sent his other group of cavalry into the troop. And then he moved his other dragon into position to get flank charges and whatnot and to support for the following turn. And that's just another picture of that. There's how that fight looks from a different angle. And then over here, that's his 6 wounds, but doesn't break them. And again, doesn't really break those guys. I did, on my turn, let me think this through. Oh, I forgot to mention this. On my turn previously, I flew my king out and charged his siege breakers just to give them pause. His countercharge did 5 wounds to my king, but did not kill him. Over here, he charged his giant into my earth elementals, but only did a couple of wounds. He popped the Iron Guard like Soul Reaver Cav want to do in a single turn. And he, of course, popped the troop of Berserker Brock Riders. On my turn, my countercharge is pretty strong. I managed to get a countercharge that he did not expect over the hill into the flank of the Soul Reaver Cav with my king, and another flank charge from the Iron Guard that were in the forest, and then a front charge from the Berserker Brock Riders into his Soul Reaver Cavalry. I charged the other Soul Reaver Cav with my Strength Brocks, and then I double charge into flank and front into his dragon. My Berserker Lord had to run through the forest to get there, but he went ahead and charged his other dragon riding guy, just to put some wounds on it. I scooted my other Iron Guard in the center there up in the forest, up in front of his hunters. I didn't charge, I just kind of wanted to move up in his way. Because he's got Ensnare, and if I charge, then it's 6s to hit, but if I can get a counter charge, at least I can stop that. I go ahead and fight in these close combats. Oh, and then in the center, yeah, here's the elementals. I just did this big, nasty charge, 2 in the front, and then the other elemental on the flank. That gave me a pretty good opportunity to pop that giant. Unfortunately, my king, we realized when this turn began that we forgot about Brutal on my king, and so he was only 1 shy on the previous thing, so we thought my king was free, but we realized he was wavered, and he failed his headstrong check, so he was stuck in front of those siege breakers and was unable to put any more wounds on them. I backed my shooters up and then just double charged his Pharaoh with these two drilling machines, which worked out really well. And then I countercharged in to fight his already wounded Vargheists. That looks like the death of something. I'm not sure what I killed there. I have to look back. The giant's definitely dead, though. And over here, I did some shooting. Oh, I must have shot something off over there on the right-hand side in that last picture. I must have blown something up with shooting. It was the other Goblin Blaster, but it wasn't near enough anything to do any wounds. Here, I did some, put a couple of wounds on the hunters with shooting and wound up wavering them. And then, yeah, that was shooting. I think the sum total of my shooting phase. Over here, we killed we wavered the Pharaoh. Didn't kill him. Did a bunch of wounds, but did not kill him. And then popped the giant and turned to face. We popped we didn't pop the dragon, but we did a bunch of wounds to him. Wound up wavering him as well. And I did just like a handful of wounds to the other dragon with my Brock Lord. And just did like 3 wounds or 4 wounds to those other guys. Like I did not do hardly anything to the Soul Reaver Cav, and so I was pretty much screwed. Those Brocks are dead. So his countercharge, he goes into the front of the Brocks and the flank of the Brocks. This is a very serious problem, and my Brocks are doomed. He also went ahead and charged my shield breakers with his wraiths, and he charges other wraiths into the organ cannon. In the center, this went very, very poorly for me. He went ahead and charged my king and killed him, and then he overran into my greater elemental and killed that. So there he is into the over elemental, into the greater elemental. Man, siege breakers are awesome. He just popped that guy too. But he did leave himself hanging when he did that, vulnerable for a countercharge from my own elementals. He, needless to say, killed those Berserker Brock Riders, which was problematic. They didn't really do their job or get their points back. And of course, he starts healing because of Life Leech. But my 2 heroes are in a pretty good spot. He reforms up such that it's not super bad, but they're in a pretty good spot. I can start directing some shooting and make some of the choices in there and hopefully not, do too poorly. Over there, my turn, I went ahead and charged both of my drilling machines into that unit of wraiths, which had just killed my organ gun in the prior turn. And then all of this shooting turned around to face his zombie dragon. So between the breath weapon and the rangers and Herneas and the other breath weapon and the other breath weapon, we popped that dragon. I managed to slide to the right to get my point into the flank of his siege breakers and then surge them into the flank. I love surge shenanigans. And I put my giant and my Iron Guard into the unit of hunters. I knew it was the front. I knew I was going to be hitting very poorly, and I probably wasn't going to pop them just because they had Ensnare, but I just wanted to pin them in place in the hopes that I could kill those guys between the organ gun shooting into the unit of siege breakers and the flank from the elementals. I figured I could pop those siege breakers. Over here, I dropped the Berserkers into the front of the unit of Soul Reaver Cavalry. I put my king into his dragon and failed to kill either unit, which sucked because it was going to cost me yet another unit of Brock Riders when he did the same thing and went front and flank on the following turn. And that's exactly what happened on his turn. He went front and flank into those Berserker Brock Riders and they died. This is his counter charge into my elemental. So my elementals popped as siege breakers. I missed a picture or two. My elementals popped as siege breakers. He then counter charged with his regular warriors and his mammoth into my elementals, which of course popped them. And he's got Gorkagamak up there. And he turns to face my elementals in the center of my line. Over here, managed to destroy the hunters. I think between the greater elemental and my iron guard, I rolled really well and managed to pop them. He did bring his king or his war chief into the flank of my iron guard eventually, and then I started working on him with my Berserker Brock Lord. And then this is me. I once again did the surge, shoot, and surge. So I moved up and decided I was going to shoot into those ogres with everything that I had. Which included now lots of guns because these guys are free and clear on the right-hand side. My shield breakers, having done really good work against all of those wraiths and against the Vargeist, were moving up towards an objective. You'll notice there are objective counters throughout. We were playing kill and pillage. Probably should have mentioned that in the first frame. And then over here, this is just me kind of cleaning up shop in the backfield. These two drilling machines definitely making their points back, killing wraiths, killing all kinds of stuff. And that's me in a crappy picture getting out towards that. All right, so this is like one of the key turns. So he had popped my Brock Rider, so I charged my King on a Large Beast into his Soul Reaver Cavalry. I hit like 6 times. I did like 5 or 6 wounds. It was pretty awesome. And popped him. I rolled real well, rolled 2 7s and destroyed him. So the King really had a great moment there and kind of turned things around for him and kind of sealed his fate at the end of the game. In the center, I kept just pounding on him. I went into him with both my Lord and my Iron Guard, but it wasn't enough to kill him. I think I may have wavered him. I started doing some damage to his boomers. My plan with the Ogre Warriors worked just fine. I did a bunch of wounds with the Organ Cannon and then surged the Elemental in there and broke them. And this is sort of towards the end of the game. He flies his king out into the rear of my Iron Guard, and then he puts his boomers into the front of the Iron Guard, so the Iron Guard are hosed, and that's fine. He then go ahead and double charges into my Greater Elemental, which is going to kill the Elemental. And then I double charge into his Lord on the Dragon, do as much as I can to him. He had his general wavered, but I decided to go into the Dragon, figuring that shooting could take care of his War Chief guy. And so I charged the Iron Guard out of the forest into the rear of his Mammoth, which had turned to face my guns. This is towards the end of the game. We'll see that picture from a different angle, same place. And then that's the rear charge into the Mammoth, which doesn't kill it because, it's got a defense 5, and I rolled for crap to hit it. I think I even got a Bane Chant off on those Iron Guard, but it wasn't enough. So there we are, looking down the barrel of that. Got a couple of pictures of that. And then there's the end of that. I just sort of moved things up and just let shooting take care of the rest of my problems. My king charged and destroyed the boomers, took the rest of the wounds off the boomers. He did blow up my Berserker Brock Rider Lord. That happened. I'm not sure if he shot him again or what. He had put 6 wounds on him with flame at some point earlier in the game. I don't remember if his king beat him up or what. I don't remember. Out here in front, I just sort of bring the individuals out and let my shooting do the trick, do the rest of the damage. That's a lie. I front and flanked his Mammoth. I charged into the front on a counter charge with my Iron Guard or my shooters. That's what happened. Sorry. He charged into their front with his Mammoth and did some wounds, but did not break them. Then I put both individuals into his flank, which is irrelevant in terms of it being in his flank, and then I countercharged to the front, and I Bane Chanted the unit of shooters, and ultimately that popped that Mammoth. And that's the last shot of the game. In the last turn, at the bottom of the turn, I also managed to use shooting and direct it at his dragon, which actually wound up totally tabling his army. It was a really good time. It was pretty much a bloodbath. I think I won in part because I had more units than him. He had like 18 drops, and I had something like 26 drops or 24 drops or something like that. And so I was able to deploy in such a way that allowed me to envelop him as he came in. And a couple of dice rolls that went my way were really lucky. Nobody had any double ones in other directions, so there weren't any swings for that. But my dice were pretty hot, especially on the left-hand side towards the end of the game when it really mattered. But I had a really good time, and I think one of the things I really love about Kings of War, and I said it earlier in the video, is just how scalable it is. I mean, this game never felt bogged down. Our turns didn't last super long. The choices we made were all pretty simple decisions. And it did still gave us a nice tactical, exciting back and forth game up until the last turn. In the last turn, I wound up clearing them off, last turn and a half or so. But up until then, we were going back and forth, taking units off, sacrificing, trading units and sacrificing things to get things done. We both made a mistake, I think, or made a couple mistakes, and I think his just hurt him more than mine hurt me. So great time, fully painted armies, painted models. I do understand now what people like about that horde of shooters with the Kenai. It's just good, consistent damage every turn. I don't know that I'm going to take it in my regular 2,000 point lists. I'm really trying to avoid gun lines with my dwarves just on principle. But I do see how it could be useful. I suppose I could always arrange my guys like this if I wanted to do it at some future tournament, but I probably will still avoid it. That being said, I'm almost certainly going to try to integrate those drilling machines into my overall list, because man, are they useful. Great backline defenders, really flexible on the attack, a bunch of attacks, crushing strength, brutal, working in tandem. They work really nicely. I'm going to see if I can't pop those guys safely off those bases and put them on some scenic cavalry bases. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. It'll probably be a long time until I post another one. I did do Alamo GT. I didn't do great. I had a pretty good first day, but my second day I got trashed on the table, so I wound up like somewhere in the like top 20 or something like that. But set me for 12th overall for the season for my ranking in terms of overall play, which is pretty good. I was hoping to break top 10, but my showing at Alamo kind of sucked, and I only got to play 2 tournaments this season, and they only averaged 2. So, I had to do well at Alamo, and I didn't do as well as I would have liked. But that's okay. I was photographing, but I was exhausted when I got there and pretty tired throughout the tournament, so I just stopped taking pictures and didn't do a big battle report. But anyway, hope you enjoyed, and I will hopefully talk to you or see you soon, and watch for videos. They might pop up, they might not. We'll see.